Okay, so today I want to talk about sort of a couple things. The first thing, the main topic, is that we're going to talk about what we call the value of statistical life, which is basically sort of the answer to the question, how much is a life worth? So I think this is something that kind of gives economists a bad name a lot of the time, because they're like putting some dollar value on human life. Turns out that's not exactly what we're doing, but to sort of the general public, that probably more or less looks like it is what we're doing. So this is something that we're going to talk about probably over the next 2 lectures. But then the other thing that I'm going to bring in is that, if you recall, like a few weeks ago, I had you guys take those stated preferences surveys, and I said I'd tabulate the results. So we went and tabulated the results. So I'm going to start off by talking about exactly what the VSL is, how we define it, and then I'm actually going to sort of bring in those survey results that you guys took, and we can see sort of what the implied VSLs are for some of the answers that you guys gave. So the fundamental question here is that what we're trying to do is essentially value investments that potentially could save lives. So there's this quote that an economist is someone who knows the price of everything, but the value of nothing. And I think many people would sort of argue that assigning a value to life represents a reductio ad absurdum argument, proving that economists go somewhat too far in trying to put prices on things. So the rhetorical question would be, well, isn't life priceless? And you could think that the answer to that might be yes, in the sense that if you were to ask somebody how much would you be willing to pay in order for me to take your life, they'd probably be willing to pay essentially a near infinite amount, assuming they actually had the ability to pay that. Despite that fact, we still end up assigning a price or a value to life when we do cost-benefit analyses. So, for example, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, valued life at $6.9 million, or a life at $6.9 million in 2008. And one might wonder, okay, how did they go about calculating that figure? Where did it come from? And I think there actually used to be a TV show about this. It was up before like all of your times, but if you've ever, oh, I forgot the sound, but this was before your times, but it was on in the 1970s.
We have the technology. We have the capability to make the world's first bionic man.
So there was a show that was called The $6 Million Man, and the premise was that this guy gets injured in some like test plane crash or something, and they have to rebuild him with bionic parts, and it's really expensive, and it costs $6 million to rebuild him. This was back in like 1970 something. The first thing to note here is the power of compounded inflation. The $6 million man is actually now worth less than the average American. Because remember, we said the EPA was valuing life at $6.9 million per person, so the $6 million man doesn't even reach that threshold. So the implication is that given the EPA's value of statistical life, we'd want to rebuild the $6 million man even if you weren't any better, stronger, or faster. So he could be just as good as he was, not actually super strong or fast or anything like that, and we still say, well, he's worth like $6.9 million, even more than $6 million. So some of you may already actually be aware. So does anybody know like how the EPA or how government agencies in general go about calculating this figure? No? Okay. Well, so there's several ways that they try to do this, or that they used to do this. And you would think that one way would potentially be to look at somebody's like earnings potential. So particularly if there's like a lawsuit or something like that, you can imagine that one of the things that comes up in testimony, if there's like, so it's like a wrongful death suit or something, one of the things will come up in testimony is sort of how like what the person's earnings would have been had they continued to live an additional 4 years or however long we think they would have lived. And so in that sense, you're sort of measuring their productive capacity, but that's not actually how they calculate this value of life. And that perhaps in some sense should be surprising, in that the average person's expected earnings over their earning lifetime would probably not be $6.9 million. So instead, the way that they calculate this is basically by measuring people's willingness to pay to avoid small risks. So when we talk about the value of life, what we really mean is what we call the value of statistical life, which we'll abbreviate as VSL in some cases. And the way that we calculate the VSL is that we take somebody's marginal willingness to pay for a risk reduction, and we divide it by the amount of the risk reduction. Or alternatively, we calculate somebody's marginal willingness to accept for a risk increase, and we divide that by the amount of a risk increase. And so the formula here is just kind of, in some ways, it's very simple. The idea is that if you're willing to pay for some sort of risk reduction, then from a statistical standpoint, we're thinking that you're essentially buying like a fraction of a life or something, right? Like if there's going to be a 1 in 1,000 chance that you would lose your life by doing something, and then you're willing to pay X number of dollars to avoid doing that thing because you dislike having the possibility of losing your life doing it, then we're thinking you sort of have essentially bought like 1/1000th of a life. And so we could take the amount that you paid, and then we can multiply it by 1,000 to get sort of the value of a full life. So that's what we mean by value of statistical life. And an example that you guys basically sort of participated in yourselves when we did the survey was thinking about paying for an airbag. So you suppose that an airbag costs like $500, and it reduces the risk of dying in a car crash from this small amount, which is 0.002, down to an even smaller amount, which is 0.0019 over the life of a vehicle. And just sort of FYI, the numbers that I gave there are not that unrealistic. Like that's sort of what probably about what the average fatality rate is for the lifetime of a vehicle, and then that's also probably the type of risk reduction that you might experience from having an airbag. So then the difference in the amount of risk reduction, the amount of risk reduction, which is the difference in the two probabilities of fatality, is going to be 1 over 10,000, I think. And the marginal willingness to pay for that risk reduction would be $500 if that's how much you were willing to pay for it. So basically, if you bought it, then we'd see you're willing to pay $500 for it. And then the value of statistical life that would be applied by that would be that $500 willingness to pay, or marginal willingness to pay, divided by that 1 in 10,000 risk reduction, which works out to be $5 million. So the thing that's really important.
Is there any relationship between the VSL and the purchasing power per year?
Of a person? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So in general, the value of statistical life is going to be increasing in income. So you can basically think of like safety as being like a normal good. It's something that people demand more of as their income increases. And so it definitely is the case that there's a positive relationship there. You can sort of, I think you could think of the variation in income coming in 2 dimensions maybe. Like you could think of poorer countries versus richer countries. So in richer countries, well, I think this definitely appears in the article that's on the syllabus, and I think I probably mentioned it somewhere in the slides. We'll see if we get there. But in richer countries, when they measure the VSL through methods that we'll discuss in a moment, they find that it tends to be higher, and in poorer countries it tends to be lower. And also to the extent that like they've done surveys within countries and also collected data on how much people earn, then again, the people who earn more tend to have higher VSLs. I mean, essentially what that works down to is like people who have more money are willing to pay more for an airbag or something like that, which probably isn't a big surprise to you. So one thing that's really important to always keep in mind here is that the VSL is going to be calculated from the willingness to pay for a very small risk reduction. And we're not talking about cases where there's like a 50-50 chance that somebody's going to die or something, or let alone like a 100% chance that somebody's going to die. So it is the value of instances here being statistical life. It's not, what it doesn't represent is the value that somebody would be willing to pay for their life, or the value that society should necessarily assign to someone's life. So I mean, we're not saying that this is the amount of money that if somebody came up to you with a gun was like your money or your life or whatever that you would be willing to pay, because honestly, at $6.9 million, probably most people would not be able to pay that. So it's not exactly accurate to say that we're assigning a dollar value to human life, but rather we're assigning a dollar value to a small change in the probability of losing a human life. That being said, you could say, well, given the law of large numbers and given the fact that there's 300 million people in the United States, conducting benefit cost analyses using the VSL really does mean that we're sort of essentially trading someone's life for $7 million. The key there is we don't know exactly whose life it is. It's just like there's a 1 in whatever million chance over 300 million people that somebody's going to die, and so you will be, unless you're really, really lucky, it's not going to be the case that 0 people die. But ex ante, you don't know exactly who it is that would die essentially. So it turns out that the empirical estimates of the value of statistical life are generally centered around several $1 million when you actually look in the literature. So there's this article that's on the syllabus by Kip Viscusi and Joe Aldi, where they really provide this comprehensive review of all of these estimates of the value of statistical life that have been done. And so when you look at that paper, you shouldn't read the whole paper, just sort of browse the tables essentially just to get a sense of the variation in the estimates of the VSL that's out there. And basically this paper summarizes several different types of evidence. So one type is what we call labor market studies. So these are, particularly these ones are going to be conducted in the US. Second type is what we call non-labor market studies. And then a third type is international labor market studies. So it's the same as, the research design is the same as the first type, but now it's looking at international context instead of just in the US. So I think here at this point, I'm going to change to just review what happened with those stated preferences survey results. So remember, these are the surveys you took a few weeks ago, where there were essentially 3 questions. One of the questions was basically about how much you'd be willing to pay for a vehicle that has airbags versus one that doesn't. Then the second question was how much you would have to be paid to take a job that involves driving around on the road and potentially exposing yourself to a fatal collision, relative to another job that's essentially exactly the same but doesn't involve this driving. And then the third was not VSL related, but was basically trying to measure people's willingness to pay or willingness to accept for oil drilling off the coast of California. So just to I'm going to sort of summarize results and then talk about a little bit about the implied VSLs and also about how the wording of the question really affected people's answers. So it turns out that, and this has been a pattern, I think, for every year that I've given the survey out. So it turns out the value attached to not driving is higher than the value attached to airbags. So in both cases, the implied reduction in risk was essentially the same. But despite that fact, people were essentially willing to pay more or willing to accept more to avoid driving than they were to pay for the airbag. So there were 2 versions of the survey. I don't know if anybody knows that when they were taking it, but there was one of them said like stated preference of survey A, and then the other said survey B. It turns out that the difference between survey A and survey B was that on survey A I told you like the exact probabilities associated with each of these events, whereas in survey B I kind of was vague about it, and you needed to kind of like either figure out for yourself or more likely just sort of guess what the probabilities might be. So when I measured people's willingness to pay with the probabilities attached, for the airbag, people were on average willing to pay $532, and in order to avoid driving, they were, in order to be willing to drive, they basically had to be given $705. So you can see that basically the willingness to accept for the driving risk was actually larger than the willingness to pay for the reduction in risk that comes from the airbag.
Yeah, I think that for me it was kind of hard to differentiate between how much I like my life versus how much I like driving.
Right. So that's
How do you capture
that difference. Well, so in that survey, I can't really capture that. So that's a good point. I'll talk about that on the next slide. So I think there's several reasons why these things might be divergent, and that's definitely one of them. To not drive. Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely that's a good point. There's definitely like an asymmetry in terms of in one case it's sort of like you're increasing your risk relative to baseline, and in the other case you're like decreasing it relative to baseline. But that being said, I don't think you'd want to think that if you didn't drive, the overall risk would be 0, right? Because first of all, it's not the case, you just wouldn't be driving for the job. It's not the case you wouldn't drive at all. And second of all, although it turns out driving is certainly probably the most risky thing that you guys can do, unless some of you are involved in extracurricular activities that I'm not aware of. So driving is the leading cause of death for people under the age of 40. But there are other causes of death, right? And so you can't rule out the possibility you could get hit by a bus or a plane could fall on you or something like that, right? So it's not the case that you'll ever get down to 0 risk. But I definitely agree with you that there's sort of an asymmetry here, and I think that may also be responsible for part of the difference. So those were the numbers when I gave you the probabilities that were involved here. And then if you had survey B, I think, which didn't have the probabilities, then the airbag willingness to pay was $669. Actually, when people had to sort of infer their own probabilities or not even think about probabilities at all, the willingness to pay went up somewhat. And the driving willingness to accept was $821. So again, the relative ordering of those 2 things is the same, in that people are willing to accept or need to be paid more to not drive than they are willing to pay for the airbag. But it's higher now. Yeah. Yes, so that's also a good point, and I guess I might as well just go to the next slide. So you guys have pretty much identified most of the possible differences here, which is great. So I think there's several explanations that are possible. So first of all, as we already discussed, there can be a disutility just associated with driving itself. So even if it were perfectly safe, maybe you want to sit back and read a book or something like that, or you don't have to sit in the driver's seat for all that time or whatever. So people are sort of willing to, or they don't want to take the job that involves driving, both because there's a danger, and then also just because they don't want to be stuck in a car that long or something like that, right? So there's that. Then there's this willingness to pay versus willingness to accept issue, and the direction of the magnitude comparisons here is going in the expected way, in the sense that usually for the same amount of risk involved, probably the willingness to accept for that risk should be larger than the willingness to pay to avoid that risk. I think there's 2 reasons for that. So one reason is that so if you just write down like a pure neoclassical economic model where people maximize the utility and they have like typical preferences that people have where they're trading off various, they're getting utility from various goods, and one good in this case will sort of be safety. Then it turns out that there are sort of diminishing marginal returns to like investing in one good versus investing in another. And essentially what happens then is that, basically I guess the way that you would think of this actually would be that there's potentially an income effect, as we already discussed, that safety could be considered to be a normal good. And so as you get more and more income, your demand for it increases. And so under that model, then willingness to accept should be marginally higher than willingness to pay, because in the willingness to accept scenario, we're actually sort of increasing your income, right? Like we're going to pay you. And in the willingness to pay scenario, we're basically decreasing your income in the sense of decreasing your total wealth in the sense that now you're going to have to pay, right? So in the willingness to accept case, you could think of all the things being equal, the person actually has a slightly higher income than in the willingness to pay scenario, so they would be probably, like their evaluation of safety would be slightly higher. That being said, even for you guys, like the amounts that we're talking about here are not large compared to sort of your total expected lifetime wealth. We're talking about a few $100s, and hopefully for everybody in this room, like your expected lifetime wealth is like several orders of magnitude larger than that. So I don't think that fact alone should really explain why it is that the willingness to accept figures are larger than willingness to pay. The second reason, though, I think is more sort of this behavioral, economic, psychological reason, which is that people kind of tend to be loss averse, right? So in like the willingness to pay scenario, you're thinking about sort of shelling out money and ending up with less money than you had to begin with, whereas in the willingness to accept scenario, it's like you already have whatever you have to begin with, and then you're just getting like this extra bonus as they pay you. And so if those losses are sort of, the monetary losses are like psychologically sort of more valuable to you than the gains from being paid, then you would again expect that the willingness to accept figures would be larger than the willingness to pay figures, which is what we observed here at least. It's also the case that maybe somehow you think that like these airbag accidents are more avoidable. I mean, basically if an airbag is involved, then that probably means it's more likely it was your fault than just a random accident, right? Because if you get, it doesn't have to be, but if there's an airbag involved, that means you hit somebody, and unless it was like a head-on collision, there's probably a good chance that you were at fault. So maybe that's why you're willing to pay less for that, because you're kind of thinking like, well, the airbag is like an accident that I can actually avoid. The slides? Yeah, I think they already. Oh, these slides. I can. Yeah, just send me an email. And somebody send me an email. No, Karen send me an email, right? Because I do not want to get like 20 emails about the slides. But yes. And then maybe there's some potential other explanations. Although I think we hit all the likely ones because that's what I came up with, and then you guys also offered your own. You guys basically came up with the same as me, so probably the most likely ones we've already gotten here. So another sort of dimension we could look at, another breakdown we could look at, is how much, including the probabilities in the survey, reduced people's willingness to pay or accept. And so this was something that I found last year, I think, and also this year, which is that survey A had the probabilities attached, survey B didn't, and it seems like when the probabilities were attached, people's willingness to pay actually went down. So their implied like values to this whole life potentially went down. Although I guess we don't really know what the VSL was in survey B because I don't know exactly what you guys were thinking of in terms of the probabilities involved.
When you have like alternative choices, like some people might say, well, I prefer that SUV instead of a small car for that. How would that alternative choices might affect people?
How would it affect these numbers? So I mean, you could. So if I gave you lots and lots of choices, you could, in theory. So okay, that's a good question, but I think answering it is a little bit complicated. So first of all, in theory, I could give you lots, like I could offer you choices of like 10 cars, all of which had differing levels of safety features and differing prices, and then using like all of that data, I could try to trace out like a willingness to pay curve for like reducing safety by increasing safety by like 1 in 10,000, and then 2 in 10,000, and 3 in 10,000, and so forth. However, the other thing that we'd want to make sure is that the only thing that was actually being varied was the safety level of the vehicle and not some other sort of feature, right? So that's why in the survey, I asked about like an airbag, because that's something where essentially you can imagine having the exact same vehicle, or like two versions of the exact same vehicle, one of which has an airbag and the other of which doesn't. And from the consumer's perspective, those things are exactly the same except for the airbag. Once we start talking about like an SUV versus like a sedan or something, though, so there are different safety implications for one versus the other. On the one hand, the SUV is heavier, which tends to help you in an accident at the expense of the other guy, but it's a separate issue. And on the other hand, we know that they're prone to rollovers, which obviously is not helpful. But you can sort of figure out how those two things net out and say like, the SUV is more or less safe than the sedan. But the problem is that then, to the extent that we see, so let's just say the SUV is more safe, okay? If you then like were to essentially look at people's willingness to pay for the SUV versus the sedan and say, I measured their willingness to pay and I measured the increase in safety and I'm going to back out the VSL using that, you're going to face a problem in that the safety difference is not the only difference between those two vehicles, right? Like the SUV also can carry your snowboard or whatever, like can haul your dog, and maybe the sedan can't. And so people are going to value that too. And so when you're seeing that they're willing to pay like $2,000 more for the SUV, you don't know how much of that is because of safety and then how much of that is because they like want to carry their 8 dogs around or whatever. So it's kind of it can be difficult then once you start comparing vehicles that are different from each other. Right. Sorry. Yeah. So that would be something that you could do in principle, as long as you felt like you could observe all of those different features. Like, so you like have total capacity and cargo capacity and horsepower and acceleration and braking and so forth. But yeah, in principle, you could do that. Okay. So when we had the probabilities attached, basically it turned out that reduced the willingness to pay for an airbag by $137, and it reduced the willingness to accept for not driving, or willingness to accept to have to drive, basically by $116. So have all of the problem sets gone around now, or did you guys? Okay. So one question you might have is, was like basically did I randomize which survey people got, right? So you can imagine that the numbers that I'm showing you right now don't actually reflect the causal effect of having the probabilities attached on your answers, because there might have been some sort of non-random distribution of the surveys. And in this case, you'd be right, but I think it's probably still as good as random, close to. So certainly, like if I said, okay, all the females will get version A and all the males will get version B, that would for sure be biased, because we know that on average, like males have lower VSLs than females, because especially in the age 20 range or so, because like these are people have like the lowest values of distal light of anybody. So that type of like non-random distribution of surveys definitely would have biased it. It was not that non-random. In previous classes, I have actually like pretty much literally randomized which survey people got, because I handed them out in class, and so then I basically just do like A, B, A, B, A, B. But this time, since I was like posting on the web and sending out emails and stuff, that was actually more complicated to do. So the randomization was not random, but rather it was like I think A through L last name got like